Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network. I am Cece Shatz. I'm the Doyenne of Relationship Building, and you're listening to Going Solo with Cece Show. I am so happy to have you with us here tonight. We have had a little bit of a kind of a we've been away from you guys a little bit. We've been doing some traveling. If you guys haven't checked out the Going Solo Travelers, please do and join us with some of the fun stuff that we've been doing. But I know I have been off and a little bit behind the scenes, but I am so happy to be back here with you tonight. Those of you who don't know me, I am a divorce, dating, and a life coach, and I'm also the CEO of Going Solo Network. So all of our media is right here on goingsolomedia.com. Check out all of our wonderful hosts and all of their shows. And let me tell you, we've got some fantastic individuals with who we call our elite guests. And the reason they are so special is not only do they support us, but they have unique positions in their own life, in their own walk through divorce, through their lives themselves. And so they kind of step forward, help us out, and we support them. And so the reason I'm bringing that up tonight is because we have a very special individual here that's going to be on as a guest, and I can't wait to bring her forward. But let's talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about cohabitation agreements with our wonderful guest, Debra Whitson. Let's bring her forward. Hello.
Hi, nice to be here.
Oh, it is great having you. Now, you are a cohabitation kind of specialist, aren't you? You do the agreement, and you're an attorney, mediator, and a certified divorce specialist. So tell us a little bit about that and, why you kind of got into doing what you do to help others through divorce.
Well, my background in law was what brought me into family law after coming out of prosecution. And I quickly realized that there's a place for courts when you're dealing with criminal matters, but courts are really no places for families to be, especially if there's children in the mix of a breakup. And I was seeing a lot more damage done emotionally to the parties and their kids. And I knew that there had to be better ways. And so that's what drew me to become mediation certified, to become trained in collaborative divorce, to get certified divorce specialist training, and high conflict co-parenting mediation training and co-parent coaching training. So I could get the message out to the world that court should be your last stop on the breakup path, rather than your first stop. And sometimes they're necessary to access courts, and sometimes it's unavoidable. But most people, if you approach this in a level-headed way and you know what your options are, you can avoid the nasty, bitter court battle and save yourself a lot of stress, anxiety, bitterness, pain, and expense, to be quite honest.
Well, I tell you, we need people like you, that's for sure. And we want to thank you for supporting us here on the network because we do appreciate that. But I thought it would be great tonight to talk about cohabitation because a lot of people don't really understand that. And we get it a lot when you talk about, in your divorce, if you're having alimony, sometimes they'll talk about, no cohabitation. Like, what the heck does that mean, right? And also cohabitation is if you are, if you're deciding that you want to establish a relationship with someone and you don't want to get married, you can create this cohabitation agreement, which gives you more of a solid ground, right?
Yeah, I think that some people, you know, it's understandable that if you've come out of a bad breakup, or maybe you just came out of an okay, amicable breakup, but you don't want to jump into another marriage. But life goes on, and relationships and love are part of being alive. So cohabiting without getting married is appealing and sometimes, a better option for many people. But there are some legal perils that people need to be thinking about or anticipating. And I want to just say here before we get into the nuts and bolts of cohabitation agreements and what they can do to help, I don't I don't want people thinking that having a cohab agreement or having a prenuptial agreement or anything like, or a postnup agreement is anticipating a failure of the relationship. They actually can be used to build a better foundation for making a solid relationship with clearer boundaries, clearer roles and responsibilities, clearer discussions about finances and how that will be handled, so that you can avoid those areas of stress and strife that many couples who don't talk through those topics or don't come to an understanding of how they'll address those topics, often that results in significant arguments. I mean, money and household finances are high up in the number of things people fight about, argue about, and break up over. So why not get clear on it at the start of your cohabiting journey so that you can set yourself up for success and hopefully never need to rely on the cohabitation agreement's terms for what happens if you break up.
Yeah, that makes sense. It really does, because those out there, I've been struggling with this cold, so I hope you guys will bear with me. But because my voice goes a little weird. But you're so right, because so often we step into something again, especially if we're stepping through a divorce, right? And then we decide we want to create another relationship with someone. Then we're a little bit lost at how to go about doing that,
Mhm.
and how to feel secure doing it. Because so often as we move forward, we're stepping away from a loss, right? And even though we want to create something new, something different, something exciting, something more secure for us, it's hard for us to be able to do that. So if we have a clear understanding of what it is that we want, a clear understanding of what's going to happen if something does happen, right?
Mhm.
We set that floor, but our eyes are open as we step forward into this new relationship, into this new surroundings. So I think the cohabitation is really very, very important, and we don't talk about it enough. So let's start at the beginning of it. How do we go ahead and start developing something like this?
Right. So, there are tools out there that can help you think about what you should be discussing as a couple and coming to some sort of consensus or understanding on. And one of those tools we offer it through my mediation company, which is Mediated Online Solutions, and my law firm, Whitson Law. It's a resource package called Designing Our Future Together, developed by a brilliant and inspiring attorney from Canada in Prince Edward Island. And it's for people who kind of like the DIY approach to things. Maybe they want to do this more on their own time, on their own terms, and on their own dime without paying a professional a lot of money to help them with this. It's a resource package that gives you a beautifully well thought out book with topics to guide your discussions, including values topics and how what communication styles are, and exploring your difference in communication styles so you can understand where you might have some challenges or room to understand each other's different communication styles. So high level stuff down to the nuts and bolts about who's going to clean the toilets and who's going to do the dishes, that kind of things, that you have a clear understanding of each person's role and responsibilities and your expectation for your mate, so that you don't have those situations where you're like, why didn't you clean the bathroom? I'm the only one who cleans the bathroom. Well, nobody ever talked about it, so maybe the other person didn't know that was expected of them. So this guide, which you can do on your own, and you can do it individually and come together and discuss your answers, or you can work on this workbook together. It's designed to be used in conjunction with mediation services. And if you use our firm's mediation services, we will develop help you reach agreement if you need some help in mediation, and draft up the cohabitation agreement in a way that's legally binding and enforceable. So you have a meaningful.
That is great. That's great. I tell you what, I really like the idea about, because I see it more and more, even in my own life, is that communication, with someone else, trying to develop, your style, their style, and then also reflection, upon our past. Sometimes we're triggered, things happen to us, and so, we kind of bring that forward into another relationship. And sometimes you just can't help it, even though we say you shouldn't bring stuff into the new relationship. You're gonna bring some stuff in, so we have to be real about it. But having something like this, that where you can design it, and it'll open your eyes to some of those issues that maybe you need to address prior to coming together, and also making your partner understand a little bit more about you and what makes you tick, and how things work for you. So that's brilliant. I think that's a brilliant idea. Now, I know you're out in New York, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
Can you
So I would like to just caution for the audience that
Mhm.
anything I tell you about the laws around these agreements, or New York, or divorce, or breakups, or enforcing divorce agreements or custody agreements, etc., is based on my New York law experience. So please consult a professional in your jurisdiction if you are not in New York State.
Right, absolutely. We do have a little clause here for that. Let me put that up so everyone knows that nothing discussed today constitute legal advice. Should you seek legal advice, consult an attorney directly. And that's very, very important to do that, because here's the thing. You want to tailor what your needs are, with an attorney that can specialize in whatever your particular field is. So you want to keep that in mind as you're moving forward and throughout your life. And so, just because you hear something may not be good for you. And so when you're talking to an attorney, they can specify it with regard to where you live, the laws there. Is it going to be good for you or not? And they can tailor it to your needs. And I think that's important. So you're absolutely right. So none of this constitute legal advice. So everyone knows that. But you're out of New York. So this information that you have, do you think that, like, just the designing part of it would be good for pretty much anybody living anywhere? Because you said it's the relationships and all of those. Mhm.
Yeah. So in most jurisdictions, agreements between intimate partners, whether they're prenups, postnups, matrimonial, settlement agreements, separation agreements, or cohab agreements, are binding contracts just like any other contract.
Mhm.
Typically, because they are not arm's length transactions, their people are intimately involved. They're given a little bit of different enforceability guidelines and considerations in enforcement lawsuits, but they're binding. And so there's no magic about New York versus another state. If you have a binding contract that conforms with the requirements for a binding contract in your state, then it's a contract. So we call it a cohabitation agreement, but all of these agreements are really just variations on a contract like any other business contract.
That's great. That's great to know, because, and there again, you can kind of look at this, dissect it, kind of get more on the page of what your needs are, and then seek a professional wherever you live, and they can help you execute that. But let's talk a little bit about the cohabitation agreement, as we start. So let's talk some about the elements of that.
Okay. First thing I want to point out before we go into what are the areas that you might want to cover in an agreement are if you are coming out of a divorce and you either have a marital settlement agreement that was made part of your divorce, or you had a trial and you have an order with certain provisions in that judgment of divorce. If there are provisions about alimony. I know in New York, we don't say alimony, we say spousal support or spousal maintenance, but I think everybody kind of knows the vernacular of alimony. So if you are the payer or the recipient of alimony, there may be something in your agreement that is triggered on cohabitating with an intimate partner. So it might trigger a cessation completely to your entitlement to receive alimony or your obligation to pay if the recipient is now cohabiting. So you're going to want to look carefully at what your existing orders and agreements say about future cohabitation. In New York, it's not an automatic trigger that a cohabiting with a romantic partner after an order of alimony is awarded to you would cease. Remarriage automatically stops alimony in New York unless the parties agreed otherwise. But parties can contract themselves into cohabitation being a trigger to stop or reduce alimony. So you're going to watch that, make sure that you understand what the impact of that New cohabitation arrangement means for your particular legal situation already in place before the cohabitation. But generally, there are, I'd like to sort of group into 4 broad topics, the kinds of things that we typically would encourage people to consider addressing, or at least thinking about when discussing the terms of a cohabitation agreement. And so one area falls broadly into housing, and we'll talk more about that. Then if you have either or both the parties have kids and they are blending families, special considerations about that. Lots of cohabiting couples. If you're pet lovers like me and my spouse, you may adopt pets or buy pets during the time you're cohabiting. So what happens if you break up? Who gets the pets? That could be a very emotional topic next to kids. It's probably one of the most emotional. And then, generally other assets and debts you might acquire either individually or jointly while you're cohabiting, and what happens to those if you break up. So I don't know, Cece, if you have any particular order in which you want me to address those broad topics, but I'll start to go.
It's nice to kind of think about that, because you don't always think about it as you go forward and you're starting to put that together. You may not think about the pets, and that is a crucial thing. I mean, I'm a pet owner myself, and I would like to make sure I still have my pet, but that kind of thing. But yeah, so I mean, I think it's very important to kind of know those kind of things. So you can kind of make a list, I think, right before you start out, of maybe some of the areas that are important to you, so that you make sure you cover those when you're speaking to someone to create this agreement. And then you can kind of hatch those things out, kind of talk about them, and make sure it happens, because co-parenting is very important. You've got your kids, their kids, could be having our kids. You never know as we move forward.
Creating all varieties of those arrangements, his, hers, and ours. So. All right. So if you want, I'll go into a little bit more detail about each of the.
Yeah, I'd love that. We've got time to do that. Definitely.
Okay. So with respect to housing, there's a lot of configurations that you may be thinking about entering into. So maybe you're going to embark on getting your own new place together. Neither of you are going to keep your current living situation. You're going to start fresh. So the question is, do you own or do you rent? And if you, in either of those scenarios, who's on the deed and who's on the lease can be very, very important and critical in the event of a breakup. So if only one of you is on the deed and only one of you is on the lease, guess who gets the entitlement to stay in the leasehold or continue owning the property? The person who's got the lease or the deed. So, but if you are joint on those things and you don't want to remain in the house, you might be obligated to pay on the lease and you don't want to live there. Or if you own something jointly, at least in New York, there are no matrimonial laws about how that real estate gets divided up in the event of a divorce. So for most people, we have a house and a corresponding mortgage loan. So we have an asset and a debt, and there may be equity there, maybe not. But then what happens if you're breaking up and you can't agree what to do with the house and the mortgage? You have to start in New York a real estate partition action, which is a specialized form of lawsuit, which is kind of protracted and expensive unless you come to some understanding outside of court how you want to handle the joint property. So that's an area that's really critical to try to address ahead of time in your cohabitation agreement. And I can tell you with nearly 100% certainty, if you're figuring these things out and agreeing up front while you're happy and in love and excited about embarking on cohabiting together, you will be much more decent with each other than when you're breaking up and there's bitterness and hurt and anger. And then agreements at that point are much more difficult to arrive at.
Right.
And then there's, another sort of special variant that I see quite a bit, especially since the pandemic, is what if you're moving into your new partner's home and they have a home-based business and you get involved in that and you grow that business, you add your blood, sweat, tears, and maybe you invest money into that. And then you break up and you never thought about or discussed formalizing your financial interest in growing your partner's business.
Mhm.
You may have no entitlement to all of the things that all the fruits of your efforts, absent a cohabitation agreement that anticipates and addresses that. So that's another thing I see quite commonly, especially more recently. And then what if you buy big ticket items for the house? You furnish a whole new place and you spend money on that, or you buy like home electronics and things like that, without some understanding of how those things get divided up when you break up. You won't have easy access necessarily to a court, or maybe you have a small claims action or something annoying and difficult and not really geared toward addressing your situation appropriately.
Mhm.
And then on the day-to-day things I mentioned, talking about sharing utilities and expenses, how will you do that? Who will buy groceries? Who will pay the light bill? Whose name will the light bill be in? Will it be in both names or one name? And then, just household responsibilities, the cooking, the cleaning, the lawn care, and garbage removal, and all that other stuff. If you want to, spell all that out, and so you're really clear on expectations, that can be something that can easily be included in your agreement. So that's sort of, the main topics that I try to cover or explore with people when I'm working with them on developing a cohabitation agreement. But I don't know, Cece, if you have any specific.
Yeah, you know what I was thinking about when you mentioned it is that because I'm a little bit older, I was thinking that would also be a good tool for, if someone would pass, if they would die within that relationship. You've also got a little bit clear understanding too about a little bit of, I know that there's estate planning and there's certain things that you would have to do with regards to that, but that would also give you a little bit of an outline of what your intention was and how you proceed with that. Now, I would assume that, and I know we probably shouldn't do that, but on a cohabitation agreement would die, right? Would end at the death of someone, would it not?
So like marital agreements, there can be language in there that says if there are unfulfilled obligations at the time of one of the contracting parties' death, their estate or heirs can be bound to honor that. So let's just say that if you write in your agreement that if either of us dies, the other becomes the sole owner of the house or the sole person entitled to all the contents of the house or any vehicles either of us own, then the estate could be bound by that if you expressly say so in the agreement.
Okay, so that would be important. That definitely would be an important factor to have, in there. Would also protect, the party, if you're the surviving party, that the family's not gonna come in and take everything, because that you don't know what's exactly going to happen there. So yeah, so that's a good idea. So it's kind of it kind of goes hand in hand with your estate planning. So you can also do the cohabitation agreement, and then also create your estate planning according to what you've agreed upon in your cohabitation agreement.
Yeah, definitely. Any important life event is a really important time to look at all of your estate planning documents, your wills, your trusts, your powers of attorney, your healthcare proxies, etc., life insurance beneficiaries, and things like that. So, and absent any major life change, every couple of years, just be dusting them off and seeing if they're still relevant and applicable to your situation, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's just like normal life, right? You have to kind of do that, reevaluate, relook at things, making sure that everything is up to date as you move forward. Yeah, definitely. I think what we're going to do is probably a good time for us to take a quick break. And so when we come back from a commercial, we'll talk a little bit further into depth about this, and so that we can understand about this. I'd like to also talk a little bit about depths of someone, like when you're stepping forward and you're looking at doing the agreement, we're looking at all of those things, but we also bring in the debt and things like that. So, how is that addressed, when you're bringing, a couple together. So, and finances is always like one of the hard things in a relationship. So it's nice to be clear and knowing all about that. But before we do that, I want to make sure that everyone knows how to get a hold of Debra Whitson. And she's She does the cohabitation agreements, but many, many other things. She's an attorney, mediator, certified divorce specialist. She can pretty much help you in all your needs. She's located in New York. So if you guys want to reach out to her, her phone number is 518-412-4111. You can just give her a call. It's 518-412-4111. And then her website, it's Whitson Law Firm. It's WHITSONLAWFIRM.com. And then you can reach her right at the law firm, which is Debra at WhitsonLawFirm.com. So just send her an email, give her a call, ask her any questions. I'm sure she'd be happy to assist you any way possible. But we want to thank you, Debra, for being with us on this half of the show.
Great to be here. Thank you.
It's awesome. All right, so stick around, everyone. We're going to do a real quick commercial, and we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm John Thomas. I want to share with you a professional products and services directory we call Going Solo Directory. And you need to check this out. If you want exposure to your business or are seeking professional product or services, this directory has it all. And that membership, for the many special features, you get the benefit of a worldwide exposure with a 40-minute video interview on an international business show showcase. All this for just one low annual fee. For more information, contact goingsolodirectory.com.
Welcome back. You guys are listening to WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network. This is the Going Solo with Cece show. I am your host. I'm the Doyenne of relationships. I'm a divorce, dating, and a life coach. And we want to welcome you back. Did you check that out? We're on Roku. All of our wonderful stations on our Roku. So you want to make sure you check us out there on Amazon TV and Roku. We're really excited that we have such a great, strong platform there. So check out all of our shows, all of our hosts, and our wonderful guests. As we have one right here with us in the studio, we're talking about cohabitation agreements with Debra Whitson. She's an attorney out of New York. She handles a great deal of cohabitation agreements, but much, much more. She's an attorney, mediator, and a certified divorce specialist. She'll really help get you through some of those tough times. So reach out to her if you have any questions at all. Again, her phone number is 518-412-4111. Again, that phone number is 518-412-4111 at Whitson Law Firm. That's WHITSON lawfirm.com. So let's talk a little bit more about our subject. We're talking about cohabitation agreements. And so let's talk, first part of the show, we really kind of outlined. You did a great job on outlining, kind of what a cohabitation agreement is, what a positive thing it is to be able to have, so that you feel more secure in your future as you're moving forward in a new relationship. You're outlining some of those, your finances, your co-parenting, your pets. There's oodles and oodles of things that you're going to be kind of looking at, and you also have a wonderful designing kit to help individuals kind of look through and kind of trigger some of those things that they haven't thought about, that might want to think about, so as they're preparing to move forward with someone in their lives. And so I think this is really terrific. But let's talk about some of those debts, right? That we want to, because like you've seen these movies and stuff like that, they're going like, oh my gosh, you got all this debt, and I've heard a great deal of like people have like big student loans and, all of those kind of, their partners wasn't aware of. So let's talk about that, because that's a real kind of a touchy subject for some.
It is. And I generally see it coming up in situations that I've worked with, where it's either one party is coming into this new relationship with a lot more debt than the other. And then the other person, maybe because they're not in debt so much, or maybe their income is higher, they want to help their their new love interest get back on their feet financially. So they help with those student loan debts. They help pay down the credit card debts. They may co-sign a car loan if the other person was in such debt and needed a new car that they couldn't. So they're either paying off pre-existing debts or they're taking on additional debt to assist this person who may not have the resources or the credit rating. And then there's a breakup. And they say, well, I'm entitled to be compensated for all these debts I paid off for this person who's now no longer going to stay with me in a romantic relationship. And I've got all these debts that I've incurred to help them because I was so magnanimous. And now I'm stuck with them, and that's not fair. And the other person, the person who benefited from these debt pay downs should take all of those with them when they leave. And sometimes that's not possible for the person to take with them because they don't have the means to handle those. And sometimes your name is on new debts and you're kind of stuck with them. So better to think about that ahead of time and say, if we help each other out, or if we have an unequal contribution to the wealth of our partnership, and one of us generates wealth and the other generates debt, how will we deal with that in a way that's mutually agreeable and fair? The other way I see it coming up is taking on new debts for significant things like buying a boat together or buying a car together. And now you have a car with a car loan, and who gets that when you break up, and what happens with that? And you're both tied to it. And anybody who's tried to refinance a car loan knows that it's almost impossible. So you may be stuck to a debt for some loan the other person is taking the asset for and relying on them to pay it on a way that doesn't affect your credit rating. So if they take the car, they say, I'll be responsible for the loan, but you're still tied to the car loan and they're late on the payments or they don't make the payments at all. Now you've got, a credit history problem on your credit for something you have no control over. So it gets, and then, may not have anywhere really to go easily to address that in court.
Right. Yeah, because again, you're not married, so you don't have any of those protections, those laws to protect you. I wonder if sometime in the future, if they'll come up with things, because so many people are living together, if they'll come up with some sort of rulings with regards to that. But currently, we really do need to have something like a cohabitation agreement in place so that we can have a clearer understanding, not only as we step forward into a relationship, but what if we have to exit the relationship? So it's kind of it helps us both ways. And so we want to think about that. We don't want to be doom and gloom about things, but we have to be realistic. And many of us, have been in marriages before. We know what it's like. We know how difficult it is when it ends. And so you don't want to experience that again within a relationship. So this is really great. Is there any other things you can think of that would be a little bit of a trigger that we probably would need to maybe be aware of that we wouldn't think about?
Well, I think, the area of kids and custody and all that is probably worth a show of its own, but I guess it's just worth mentioning a few things to consider. One is if, some custody orders or agreements have certain time frames within which you cannot bring a new person into the children's lives or whatever. So you got to watch for that. Those are relatively rare, but we still see them often in mediation session agreements. Courts don't like those, but some people like to have that protection of don't have the revolving door of new love interests in the children's house. Right. So watch for that. If there is something in your new cohabiting partner's background that might trigger the other parent of children you have in common with another person to move to modified custody because there's something concerning, maybe a history of alcoholism or substance abuse that is being treated, or there's sobriety, but it may be a concern that the other parent will raise that will destabilize perhaps your existing custody situation. So think about that. But more importantly, if you're blending families, I think it's really important to get clear on defining I like to call it the step-parent lane. The step-parent needs to stay in their lane, right, and not cross over into parent lane. And but you need to define for your situation, what is the step-parent lane? Mm-hmm. Are they allowed to discipline and correct the children when the children are in the step-parent's care alone? Mm-hmm. or can they always correct or discipline the child or children, even if the parent is present and able to do so? So will the new paramour have conversations with the other bio parent? And if so, what topics are okay? Maybe transportation arrangements, or somebody's running late and the other parent who's not in the household is okay talking to your new love interest, and that goes well. But more often than not, it's better to define the things that should be discussed between the parents themselves, and the steps should sort of stay out of that lane. And you'll avoid a lot of tension and conflict, and you'll avoid destabilizing what might have already been a stable custody and parenting situation with your ex, by the new person injecting themselves into the parenting relationship in a way that steps over bounds or steps on toes. That's a little harder discussion to, sort of clarify and define what will those boundaries be. But it's really important. I think it can make things better for the kids in assimilating a new person into their life and a household that they spend time in. And make things between the adults who are loving and raising these children, even if they're not biologically connected to them, get along better. And then another area that really is worth discussing is within this new cohabiting household that may have a child from an outside relationship, how will expenses for things related to that child be decided? So let's say you're cohabiting with someone who has a child and you don't, and your new partner wants to spend $3,000 to send the child on a school trip to Europe, and you think that's outside of your budget. So are those decisions you should be making mutually? Is that entirely up to the biological parent to decide to make that expenditure, or to buy the 8-year-old a smartphone, or to allow elaborate access to iPads at all times of the day or night? So those are some kinds of things that the expenses and putting limits on those sorts of things often cause friction if you haven't really gotten clear on how will you address those.
Right. I remember, with my kids as they were growing, you just didn't realize all the things that you would come across, right? And so you're working together, as a family, right? And so, you may have, a new, like you said, a new partner that you have to consider. Then you would have to also consider your ex, making sure that that's going to blend all together. And so that's way nobody's, toes are getting stepped on, and everybody and feels like they're working together as a unit versus working separately. And I think that's very wise. I think that's very smart, because the more we can create a strong unit, we can show our kids that we are a unit as a family. It creates a lot of security for them to grow up and feel safe and feel good about their environment. So that's a wonderful thing, I think, to be able to create that. And so I think you're very wise to be able to address these issues head on and help families to be able to think about some of these things, not only today, but what's going to happen in the future. Kids are going to go to college, or kids are going to have special schools and special things that are going to come across. How do we handle that as a family? How is that going to be handled financially? And so, yeah, I think that's very good. And when people feel like they're included in something versus, just the decision is made without their interjection, to make them feel like they're included, it really does lessen the arguments and the disagreements and the painful situations that you have as growing pains in a family, right? Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. I think inclusion and having a say in how things are handled in any relationship is important to success and happiness and deepening in your relationship.
Yeah, very much so. Well, it looks like our time is starting to come to the end. Is there anything and closing words that you'd like to share with our audience? Anything maybe we didn't touch on, or something you'd like to make sure you share with them before we close out the show?
I guess I would just like to say that when I think about working with couples and cohabitation agreements, again, I want to reiterate, don't think, oh, we're projecting that our relationship's going to fail. I think it's really important to recognize it's a significant life transition, and planning for it and being intentional about it is going to set you up for success and more long-term harmony and happiness. So, yeah, it's not a cop-out that you're giving up at the outset of embarking on a new cohabitation arrangement.
Yeah, you're so right with that. And I think as we move forward in our life, we want to do it in a very positive, understanding, and we really do want to feel like we are taking the initiative to, create the life we want, right? Rather than just picking up the pieces on a life. And so the more we can create, the more we can define, the more that we can help control that a little bit better, to get a clearer understanding, share that with our partners. I think it's a blessing indeed. So cohabitation agreements, I didn't even know they existed, honestly. And so I am just really pleased to be able to bring you, Debra, to our show and share your wisdom on this particular subject, because I think it's a very important one. And thank you so much.
Well, thank you for letting me tap into your audience, because I am a big fan of these agreements. And the more we can get the word out, the more people we can help be intentional about designing their future together. And I think that's great.
I like that, intentional. That's exactly the proper wording for that, because we want to be intentional in life. We want to design our life, and as we move forward, and make sure that it's a very positive one. So everyone, you want to make sure you get a hold of Debra Whitson. You can give her a call at 518-412-4111. Again, that number is 518-412-4111. Her law firm is Whitson Law Firm. That's WHITSON lawfirm.com. If you want to send her an email, it's Debra, DEBRA, at whitsonlawfirm.com. So reach out to her. She's in New York. If you don't live in New York, you could always reach out to her and she'll maybe direct you or whatever, you've got a quick question. But if you're in New York, definitely call her, because, you want to get this information down and be able to move forward with it. So thank you so much. I totally appreciate you, Debra.
Thank you, Cece. I appreciate all that you do for your audience. You're such a great resource. And I do want to say that we mediate anywhere. So mediators aren't bound by state licensure. So if you want to mediate a cohabitation agreement or access our resource package on designing your future together, we can help you no matter where you are in the world.
Oh, that's wonderful. I didn't know that. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Well, everyone, we're going to have to close out the show. We want to thank you so much for being with us tonight. You're listening to WGSN-DB Going Solo Network. This is Going Solo with Cece, and I am Cece Shatz signing off. And thank you so much. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.